Okay? So let's discuss why you really don't want to do this sort of stuff. You don't really want to kill other nations' leaders, okay? And so let's just use an analogy. Let's imagine in the streets, there are two gangs at war with each other, okay? Gang A and Gang B. Okay, Gang A, Gang B. And if you look at gangs, they are structured as hierarchies, okay? But there's a lot of autonomy among the different sections, okay? And what holds the gangs together, of course, is the leader. So when these two gangs go to war, what they try to avoid is killing each other's leader. Why? Because a war is often used to achieve certain political objectives, right? And so the point isn't to kill everyone. The point is to negotiate a treaty that is most beneficial to you. And you do that by negotiating with each other's leaders, okay? Because they have the authority to implement the treaty. That's the first reason. The second reason is if you kill the leader, then more people, there'll be a competition to replace the leader, right? And during a gang war, the person who is most violent, the most extreme, will often become the new leader, okay? So by killing this leader, not only do you cause conflict among the gang, but you also cause a massive escalation in the conflict between these two gangs, and there's really no way out. That is why historically you do not target other nations' leaders, because then there's no off-ramp. Okay? So by targeting Larijani, the Israelis and the Americans have ensured that there will be no off-ramp now. This war we fought to the bitter end. And unfortunately, as we discussed previously, that is the objective here. The Israelis and Americans are interested in maximalist aims to destroy Iran permanently. Okay? And the Iranians are also maximalists in that they want to destroy the global economy permanently in order to restructure reality itself. All right, okay. So this leaves us with three major questions that I want to look at today, okay? The first big question is, how are these leaders dying? It's not that easy to kill a leader, right? Because he's protected by security. And usually there are two ways to figure out where the leader is, okay? There's human intelligence, called HUMINT, and there's signal intelligence, called SIGINT. Okay? Human intelligence, signal intelligence. Signal intelligence just means electronic eavesdropping, where I listen in on your telephone calls, where I track your IP address, okay? And the Israelis and Americans are obviously very sophisticated in that. And the Americans and the Israelis are saying that we are using electronic surveillance in order to track these people down. I don't think that's convincing. I think the most important source, the most reliable source of information is human intelligence, having spies embedded in local networks to spot for you where they are, okay? That's the best way to figure out where they are. So then this raises the question, how are the Israelis and the Americans getting this human intelligence, okay? All right, that's the first question we want to look at. How are these leaders dying? Second question is like, why are they dying? Like, what's the point of killing them, right? Because once they die, they can just be replaced, and they're often replaced by a more extreme individual, okay? So that's the second question we want to look at. And the third question we want to look at is, what does this mean for the war and the world? Okay? What do these decapitation strikes ultimately mean for how this war will progress and how this will affect the world in general, okay? All right, so those are the three big questions I want to look at. So to answer these three questions, I want to introduce a new idea to you, okay? It's called the law of proximity. The law of proximity, the idea is this. Whenever you play a game, you're not just playing one game. You're playing many, many different games. And the game that you choose to play is the one that is most proximate to you, the one that is most close to you. And that impacts your decision making the most. Okay, so that's a law of proximity. So let me explain to you what this means using an analogy, okay? Let's just use your life. You are playing actually multiple games every single day, all right? So let's examine this. The first game you play, of course, is the family game, right? So you might have parents and you have siblings, okay? And the game you're playing, of course, is to win attention from your parents. And to do so, depending on who your siblings are, you might use different strategies, including doing well in school or being a pain in the ass. Unfortunately, my kids choose to be a pain in the ass, okay? Yes. The parents are playing another game, which is social prestige, right? So they're competing against other parents to have the best family possible, all right? So, and then not only do you play a game at home, but you also play games at school, right? Right? So when you go to school, you're competing against your classmates for attention and popularity, but you're also playing a game in the school to get the best grades so that you can get into a good college, right? Then you go to work, where you're competing in order to win the favor of your boss and to be popular among your colleagues. Then you play a city game where you live in Beijing and you want Beijing to be better than maybe Shanghai or Shenzhen, okay? And then you play a game of maybe a nation where you want China to be stronger than Japan, okay? So as you can see, every single day you're playing multiple games, even though you may not recognize it. And again, what's important is the game that is most important to you is the game which you are most close to, right? The one that you can see in front of you. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, but this is also true for nations as well, where we think that the game is between nations. But really, the game is within nations. And the conflict within nations is the one conflict that determines how nations behave against each other. All right, so today what we will do is we will look at 3 examples of this, okay? We will look at the civil conflicts in America, in Israel, and in Iran to figure out why they behave the way they do, and then figure out how this war will progress. Okay, so clearly there is a civil conflict right now in America. Okay, you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. Now what's odd is that even though these 2 different political parties are at war with each other, they both support the war because their calculus is different. Okay, so why do the Democrats support this war? Well, it's because they believe that this war will be extremely unpopular in America, which will allow the Democrats to dominate in the midterms in November and then win the presidential election in 2028. And they believe that this war will be so unpopular, it will destroy Donald Trump and allow the Democrats to rule forever. It will basically destroy the Republican Party. All right? And so that is your strategy. And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. The Republicans have a different strategy, which is this war may be unpopular, and this war may make America lose, but it's okay. Why? Because in a time of war, the president has something called the Emergency Powers Act, okay? Emergency powers. Emergency powers allows the president to essentially suspend the Constitution and to suspend or delay elections. Also, The Republicans want to pass something called Save America Act. Okay? The Save America Act, which means that if you are a voter, you must present ID in order to vote. And you think that this is, well, reasonable, but historically, the idea of checking ID is a way to discriminate against minorities, right? To have police officers there to scare minorities. And that's traditionally how racism was enforced in America. Okay? So in other words, the Republicans have many different strategies of either cheating or manipulating the elections. They could also, I have to say this, but if the war's going really badly, what they will do is call a national draft and cancel the elections, okay? All right, so these are two different strategies going on. But as you can see, this is not really about America defeating Iran. This is really about the Democrats or Republicans trying to obtain power and keep it, okay? All right, but what's important for us to understand is that it's not just about the Democrats and Republicans at war with each other. There's actually a much deeper divide in America, okay? And this divide is a conflict between the elite and the counter-elite. Remember how we introduced the idea of elite overproduction, right? This is the Peter Turchin idea. And he argues that what leads to civil war is that you have too many elite who want to be the ones in power. Power is a zero-sum game, and therefore, when you have elite overproduction, they have to go to war against each other in order to have the power. Okay? And so, what's going on? Who are the elite and who's the counter-elite? Well, I mean, to put it very simply, the Democrats represent the elite, and the Republicans represent the counter-elite, okay? So, basically the elite is the empire. And counter-elite is MAGA, which is America First. And so they have two different ideals for America. The empire is to maintain the current global order, right? And MAGA is to retreat back into the Western Hemisphere and focus on Americans' core national interests. Right. They're also divided into finance and AI. Okay? So in other words, Wall Street are the main backers of the current elite, and then Silicon Valley are the main backers of the counter elite. Okay? So these people are interested in maintaining the status quo. They are interested in a revolution, right? And so this is the main divide in America that will eventually lead to a civil war, like an actual civil war, okay? But right now, they're fighting over foreign policy. So I will discuss this more in the future, okay? But I present to you now. So let me give you a concrete example of why they're fighting. Why are people in finance fighting with people in AI? And there's a very good reason. Because if you're able to control Washington, D.C., if you're able to control the levers of government, you're able to make a lot of money for yourself, okay? So let's look at this concretely. Okay, what people don't really understand is that both finance and AI are bubbles that will burst. They're parasites, okay? So finance is a parasite because there's something called a private credit bubble, all right? Private credit bubble, the idea of private credit is very simple. Rather than banks issuing loans to companies, companies privately issue loans to other companies. And you would think that these companies would be very careful with who they lend to and how much they lend to, right? That's not true though, okay? Why? Because in 2008, these banks destroy the global economy, and the American government bailed them out. Right? They suffered no consequences. This idea of moral hazard. If you do not suffer consequences for your stupidity, well, you're just going to be more stupid in the future. Okay? So these companies believe that we control Washington, D.C., therefore we can be as risky and stupid as we want. So they're giving out lots and lots of silly loans to companies because they collect a fee for these loans, right? And then when these loans don't actually work out, meaning the companies go bankrupt, what they do is they say, oh, we'll lend you some more money to keep afloat, okay? So now this problem has reached about $2 trillion. And so they think that, okay, well, worst case scenario, the government will bail us out if we all go bankrupt because we're too big to fail. And all our friends are in government. Okay? That's their mentality. And in 2008, that worked. But there's a problem today, which is there's also another group that's doing the same crap, okay? And it's called the AI bubble. All right, so if you look at AI bubble, you've got companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, NVIDIA, okay, lots and lots of different companies. And the way they operate is they just lend money to each other, okay? It's like, I give you $1 billion, then you give me $1 billion, and now we have $2 billion. Okay? It's a circle jerk. And it's getting a lot of money from the GCC and other investors. The problem, of course, is what's happening in the war, right? So if the GCC can no longer put more money into this bubble, then eventually this bubble will have to burst. But they're like, that's okay. Why? Because we control Trump. We control the White House. We are the stock market. Therefore, Washington, D.C. will bail us out. Okay? So that's the war going on, where you have two parasitic forces, the finance sector and the tech sector, and they are all looking for government bailouts when their bubble bursts. But the government doesn't have infinite money. It can only bail out one side, right? So they're going to fight over with the government. They're going to fight over who bails who out, okay? If the Democrats can win the House and the presidency into 2028, then the private credit people will get bailed out. But if Trump and his people stay in power in 2028, then the AI people will get bailed out, okay? So that's the civil war going on in America right now. We'll discuss this more later in the future, but I just present to you right now, okay? And then, of